solution presentation. So if I can get a modification of the agenda, because we're not going to be taking any action on anything tonight.
Move to approve the modification of the agenda to just talk about the site logic.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second, Mandy.
Mandy? All right, thank you, Mandy. I got a motion by Jeff, second by Mandy to amend the agenda just to talk about site logic solution and funding. Discussion. Seeing none, I guess, should we just say aye? Are we all right with that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, passes. So do we need a motion then for the agenda, Tom? Or is that count enough?
I would move to approve the amended agenda.
All right. All right, so now do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Jeff? Do I have a second?
Second,
Who was that?
Joni?
Joni.
Joni? Okay, thank you, Joni. Motion and a second by Jeff and Joni to approve the agenda as modified. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, passes. All right, we'll move on to the site logic presentation.
All right, well, I can introduce Michael Smith and Karen Gagne, who you met at a board meeting earlier in the fall. I'll let Michael introduce the other site logic staff that are on the line and let Michael take over with the presentation this evening.
Wonderful. Just sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that now.
Yep.
Okay, it should look fairly familiar to you. So first off, my name is Michael Smith. It's a pleasure to be able to join you guys this afternoon, and thank you for accommodating this meeting, especially given the interesting weather that we're receiving at the moment. So appreciate you guys spending some time with us this afternoon. The other piece I wanted to say ahead of kind of diving into this, typically, when we're working with districts, we would have multiple different meetings over a long period of time. So I really appreciate you guys cramming quite a few meetings in over a tight schedule over the next month. I know we have a really harsh deadline of January 21st to make any decisions on this. So I really appreciate you guys being flexible in terms of giving us some time to make those decisions and make those decisions very thoroughly. Okay, so tonight's meeting is what we would call a solutions and funding meeting. Although what I'd really like you to think about is just, this is a data dump. We're giving you a huge amount of information tonight, no decisions. We're not asking for any decisions at all. We're not asking for you guys to commit to anything. What we're doing is we're just sharing a lot of the information that we've got, that we've acquired over the last few months. The other part that I'm sure you're aware of, there's a community task force that's working in parallel with us, who will be presenting to you in January. Those guys have been looking at a lot of the same information and will come up with a recommendation. So we don't want to jump ahead of them. We take the recommendations of those community task force incredibly seriously, because when we're talking about a potential referendum, it has to be born of and from the community. So those are kind of my precursors to this. As we go through this presentation, if we were doing it in person, I would really welcome questions, comments, conversation. So please treat this meeting as if it's the same. If you have questions or comments, please interrupt and ask them, and we'll do our best to answer them. All right, let me show you what we're going to talk about tonight. So in the first instance, we'll introduce ourselves. We're going to share our engineering and architectural findings. We're going to discuss the infrastructure of your existing buildings and some of the different strategic solutions that you could take moving forward. I'll talk briefly about what the next steps look like, and then give you an opportunity for questions. Okay. I'll introduce the team. As you can see, we all had really nice headshots, and we don't look like this in person. Well, except for Brian, like he's in a winter cabin somewhere. But I'm Michael Smith. I'm a planning executive or program executive. I essentially quarterback any projects that school districts want to do. So I bring in the right engineering team, the right architectural team, community engagement. I'm really at the sort of the hub of driving the thought partnership with school districts. Karen is also in a very similar role, so you're lucky to have two of us on this one. I'll introduce Ryan Graham. Ryan, do you want to just quickly say hi? Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
I just noticed that. My apologies. Yeah, Ryan Graham, happy to join you this evening, Director of Programming and Planning. So I work with the development architecture team here at SiteLogic.
Perfect. And then at the far right there, we have Nick Bauer, who's been your engineer. Nick, do you want to just say a quick hi?
Yeah, hi everybody. Nick Bauer, development engineer. My job on this project was to be the boots on the ground kind of in the beginning to get a baseline of your buildings, and then take that baseline and drive towards some solutions and pricing that we'll get to in workshopping.
Perfect.
Michael, I'm just going to jump in. Can people that are not speaking, I think, Laura, you're picking up some feedback. Can people that aren't speaking just mute while others are talking? Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. All right, we're going to start off with findings overview. So I know in this particular format and spending a couple of hours talking about facilities, it's very difficult to really absorb all of this. We're going to show you a huge amount of information. So there's a few really key takeaways that I want you to take from tonight. And the first one is from your infrastructure. So with the exception of the middle school, your buildings are really well maintained. You know, we're really impressed. I'm going to call Sean out on this. I think he's doing a wonderful job. You're really looking after the community's assets in terms of what you have, with the exception of, you know, obviously what we know to be the problem child at the middle school. You have some aging infrastructure, but we strongly believe that you could move any of those replacements down the line. I think that you've got probably some items that will certainly come up within the next 10 years, but for the most part, you're in pretty good shape. As we know, that middle school really requires a major overhaul, and it's currently costing you a lot of money to maintain. And it's really trying to fit a square peg into a round hole at the moment. And then that last piece, you've got some infrastructural pieces. And when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about maintaining the existing building stock. You've got some infrastructural items that you could proactively replace at this stage, rather than waiting for a reactive situation. Do you need to? In our opinion, at this point, I think you could probably get away with pushing some of these down the line. I'm going to jump into our process. So I'm going to try and share another screen. So bear with me whilst I flick to this. Okay. What I want to share with you, you should now see Adams Friendship Area School District, and you should see three listed schools there. This is what we call our MySite IQ platform. So the reason I'm showing you this is because when Nick and his team went through the buildings, we collect every single piece of every single asset that you have. We look at the condition that it's in. We look at the age of it. We look at we look at whether or not there are any risks to it, and we categorize all those. So I just wanted to show you that for the first time, you guys now really have a wonderful tool at your disposal. Here's your floor plan for the high school. What you now have available to you is every single asset in that particular building. So down the right-hand side here, if we wanted to go into room 513, we can do so. We can see it's a classroom, 902 square foot. The assets within here, we can look at. This one's been served by air handling unit 7. We have flooring that was installed in 1997. It's in acceptable condition. It's a rolled carpet. We can literally navigate anywhere within your buildings and see the current condition of them, as well as all the different assets in. So in this particular instance, we've got photos of that particular classroom. We can look at the bell and intercom system. We can look at the phone systems within there. This just really means that again, looking now at flooring within here, we can really accurately catalog and categorize all of the different pieces that you have throughout that building. So you can see this is a good example. Here's some flooring that's reaching the end of its life, but could it be extended? Yes. Is it worth spending a huge amount of money on at this point? That obviously is for you guys to decide. So once we have all of those different assets, what it allows us to do is it allows us to look at it from a perspective of what risks do we have within these buildings. This I'm going to share across to a different tab. You should now be able to see this is your district-wide comparison. So in this instance, you have just some bar graphs. Anything in orange is something that we will be talking about or something that's of concern. So you can see the middle school there has about 40% of it in orange. Those correlate to what we call alert and alarm condition. So those are items that really should be considered immediately or in the very near future. Items in the light kind of blue color are what we call caution items. Caution items typically mean that they need to be on your radar for the next 10 years or so. In the case of the middle school, you can see that building, 90% of that building is either in caution, alert, or alarm. And that gives you a really significant risk. We also have a dotted orange line there, which is pretty much an indicator of if we're beyond that line, it's not a building that's worth reinvesting in. The items in caution in the middle school, if we wanted to go into it, we can look at those specific items. Ooh, why is it not letting me do it?
Hit a refresh on the page, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So what we're able to do is then dive into the building at a much more granular level. We have all your air handling systems. You can see that this particular one it was installed 72 years ago. You've managed to get a really pretty good run out of that one. But you have a lot of items that have either reached their useful life or have exceeded it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they need replacing. So if we look at it from a line-by-line item, what we're able to see is every single one of your assets listed in here, and then the corresponding condition. Nick, would you just kindly kind of explain what's happening in this table?
Yeah, absolutely. So really what we're doing here is we collect the data when we walk through your buildings is plotting all of it onto this table that we're looking at here. And it's a function of sort of two different categories. The first of which is that life expectancy. So we gather the ages of all of the assets within the building, plotted in there, kind of a column just left of center on the screen here. Compare it to the ASHRAE standard life expectancy of that particular asset. And then what that does is calculates the percentage of life expectancy for that particular asset. But as we know with lots of things in life, if you maintain them correctly, age doesn't always tell the story. And so the other part of our assessment is looking at the actual condition of those assets themselves. And that's the asset condition column that you see there. So that's our professional grading on each of the different assets within your building. And so between the age of the asset and the asset condition that we assign to it, there's a little bit of a formula and a calculation that gives us the age-adjusted asset condition, which is where we start to look at the condition of the building as a whole, and it helps us kind of prioritize where we want to go with solutions.
Perfect. Now, I'm really excited to spend the next 2 hours going through about 6,000 different line items with you on this. But I think for the sake of brevity, what I'll do is I'll come back out to our PowerPoint and I'll just let Nick talk about some of the high points in it. Are there any specific questions about the assessment process or about categorizing it in this format? Wonderful. Okay. Let's get the, how do I share across? Nope, that one. Okay. Back to the PowerPoint. All right. one of the things that we certainly know, you've got some challenges at that middle school. So it was originally built in 1918. You've had major additions in 52, 64, 1970, and then the latest one is 97. There's some substantial updates that are required for this building. So mechanical systems, interior finishes, plumbing, you have some ADA access issues, parking lots, exterior items, windows, doors, even steps and things like that. There's a lot of investment that would be required into this building. It's costly to repair and modernize. And even in that instance, you're really still just making it work for your students. The other piece that Ryan will show in a little while is just from a capacity utilization standpoint. You've got a lot of square foot there for the number of kids that are going through that building. Really categorizing the problem, it's putting good money into bad at this stage. So some of the solutions that Ryan will take us through are looking at what possible consolidation looks like, either across to the elementary school or across to the high school. All right. Nick, do you want to just pull out, let's get to your, almost there. Nick, do you want to just talk about some of those key elements from an engineering standpoint?
Yeah, so when it comes to the kind of key elements that we've come up with for the 3 buildings that we really took a look at, starting with the elementary, the highest priority assets for, to consider for replacement would be air handling units 2 and 3, which serve the gym and classrooms respectively. Some of the VCT tile that serves the building, the parking lots and the exterior doors. At the middle school, the parking lots, the main electrical service and distribution. Again, air handling units 2 and 3, they serve the gym in that building. HV 1, 2, and 3, which are air handling units that serve the classrooms and offices, and then the VCT in that building as well. And then lastly, for the high school, the fire alarm system is beyond its expected useful life. Parking lots, hot water and chilled water pumps, and rolled carpet. And just if I can add one more thing about the buildings as a whole and kind of echo Michael's statements, it's in the, all 3 or all 2 of the buildings, with the exception of the middle school, are in pretty outstanding shape, and it was hard for me to put together the list for those 2 buildings, just based on the maintenance that's been done across the elementary and the high school.
Wonderful. Let's take a look at some of those particular assets.
And so to dive into the level of detail and to give you an example of how deep we go on all these different assets within the building, I've prepared about 6 slides here to show you just some of them. First thing we're looking at here is those air handling units 2 and 3 in the elementary school. They serve the 91 classrooms and the gym. They're 3 years beyond their expected useful life. In the bottom right-hand corner is the type of return system that brings the air back from the spaces. It's a plenum return. Just these units are utilizing an older style of technology, so they provide poor space temperature control compared to newer modern systems. And then air handling unit 3 utilizes reheat coils to control the individual space temperature, which again doesn't really allow you to modulate airflow into the spaces. It really just helps with heat into them.
Wonderful. Let's take a look at any questions on that particular one. Okay.
Looking at the flooring systems within the elementary school, primarily VCT, that upper left photo, it's starting to get up there in age. There's some gaps that are forming between the tiles, a little bit of damage here and there. 33 years old, so significantly beyond its expected useful life. And then just to highlight a couple of the other flooring types across the building, obviously bottom left there is the wood gym floor. There's quite a bit of rolled carpet across the building, and then the bottom right photo there being the 97 VCT. And then lastly, at the elementary school, the parking lots, you guys have re-seal coated and restriped the parking lots not too long ago, but just signs of general deterioration, specifically in the photos on the Right-hand side, you can see the cracks have been filled and sealed. However, they are starting to get relatively wide, so that just presents a temporary solution. If water starts to get into those cracks, it gets into the subbase and can really ruin the parking lot and result in complete reconstruction being necessary. Moving to the high school, the same story there with the upper two photos. That's the main parking lot. Again, resealed, striped, seal coated. But then the bottom two photos there are the parking lot at the rear of the building. Heavy deterioration on that one, larger cracks. Again, same sort of issue. As water starts to get under there, it'll deteriorate the subbase of the parking lot itself. Moving to the flooring at the high school, primarily rolled carpet throughout the building, that photo in the upper left. Original to the building, 27 years old, significantly beyond that expected useful life. And then most flooring, the upper right photo and the bottom left photo, are also original to the building. Again, in all right shape. You guys have done a good job maintaining them and keeping them looking as good as they can. However, just some replacement could be considered, so you choose. And then the photo in the bottom right there is some of the newer carpet tile that you have installed in your IMC. And then last slide I've got here are the pumping systems that serve the high school. So you've got dedicated hot water and chilled water loops to serve the building. Pumps 1 and 2, which is the bottom left photo there, serve the hot water distribution. And then the top two photos, pumps 13 and 15, serve the chilled water distribution. They're all original to the building. They're just approaching their remaining expected useful life. However, some of the seals have been rebuilt on them, I think specifically pump 2 to help extend that life. But what we're seeing is a few signs of corrosion around the pumps where some of those seals are. And then there is a bucket in that bottom left-hand corner below pump 2, likely to just catch some leaks off of it.
Wonderful. So those are the high points that Nick's really pulled out from an engineering standpoint. Any reactions, surprises? I mean, I have to say I've worked with Nick and Ryan for quite a long time now, and for Nick to not blow everybody's budget immediately on fixing infrastructure stuff is quite rare. So I think it's been you guys have done a really good job of maintaining both that high school and elementary school. Anything that you think, is surprising to you or that we might be missing on this? Wonderful. Okay. Well, in that case, you'll notice that we didn't talk about the middle school at all in terms of that infrastructure. It really does look like an investment into the middle school would be, like we said earlier, putting good money after bad. So it leads us nicely across to what Ryan's going to talk about in terms of some of the programmatic solutions. It is also, without stealing the thunder of the community engagement team, it also fits with what they're discussing and recommending. So the idea of looking at some solution sets to move students across to either the elementary or the high school. All right, Ryan. Oh, you went off camera.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn my camera off. I'm getting network notifications here, so hopefully I'm still with you. But I'll turn my camera off for a bit here. Make sure you can hear me. Yeah, so with what Michael is suggesting, or some of the information we're hearing, some of the information out of the community group, we want to take a look at capacity and utilization at each of the buildings. So that's where we began our study, was taking a look at each of the buildings, the grades they serve, how many students are enrolled in those buildings, diving into class size. So you can see that class size column. That's really just sort of some best practices or some numbers that we're using as standard class sizes we might want to see in an elementary school, middle school, and high school. We know that class size average might fluctuate up or down depending on enrollment and what the class is, the subject matter, but that's just kind of a standard that we use for this capacity and utilization study. What you'll see, utilization rates at the elementary school are 108%. I don't think that certainly wasn't surprising to me when I visit that building. it feels like a space that's highly utilized. Most spaces are occupied. There seems to be a fair amount of students in there at any given time. The cafeteria is really kind of busting at the seams where we're feeding students in an adjacent classroom. So it's certainly no surprise to me at the utilization rate at the elementary school. But what you see at the middle school and high school is we're pretty low on utilization. We're at between 40 and at 51% at the middle school. Target numbers we'd like to see somewhere in that 80 to 90%. 85% utilization is kind of the sweet spot. It allows for additional enrollment for those bubble years. It allows for some flexibility in programming and activities that students can do. So we're over by quite a bit at the elementary school, and we're showing that there's quite a bit of capacity at the other two buildings as far as enrollment goes. Any questions about that kind of baseline? Okay. Michael, you can move forward. Yeah. So what you'll see is we'll jump into some ideas and opportunities. At this point, these are really conceptual, high-level ideas as to some potential improvements at the buildings that might support the needs that we've heard thus far. So the first thing is taking a look at a few additions at the elementary school. And what you'll see is for each of the options, we have a new updated a capacity table that would reflect some grade reconfigurations. This option, we'd look at keeping the same students within the elementary school, potentially adding on a few classrooms, in the blue bubble on the top right. So there's restrooms, mechanical, some classrooms, and then adding on to the front of the building. And then what that allows us to do with the additional classrooms is see that utilization rate drop down to 93%. Still a little bit above where we'd like to see target, that 80 to 90%, but significantly better than it is today. The other thing you'll see is this option looks at moving the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to the high school building where we have capacity still. And you can see even moving all those students over to the high school building, we're still at 74% utilization. So still better than maybe that target rate we'd like to see a building at. And the next slide, I think, just shows sort of some enlarged views of those additions. So at the front of the building, the cafeteria is tight. We can look at, nearly doubling the square footage of that cafeteria space. That also helps us gain back that classroom that's being used to serve students. Anytime we're adding square footage, we're looking at adding restrooms, just because code is going to require additional plumbing fixtures with additional occupancy of a building. And then one thing we know at the elementary school is there's no receiving area today. Everything is collected at the central location, the district offices, and then distributed. Otherwise, kitchen things are brought through a traditional 3-foot door. So this opportunity would allow us to really improve that receiving area at the elementary. The next slide will just again, an enlarged view to get a better view of extending the corridor, adding some restrooms, mechanical space. Mechanical in this area would primarily be some electrical panels or electrical service. Will allow for some storage in that area as well, and then 4 new classrooms. Any questions on option A before we move on to B?
I have one. Would we be looking at some additional storage for staff, equipment that's around there, or none of that, I guess?
So you'd see some additional storage in the receiving area, and then that classroom wing, what's shown as mechanical is larger than it would need to be. So there would certainly be an opportunity for storage with those 4 classrooms in that area. It somewhere in that mechanical space. Yeah, I would say probably a third of that could support the electrical data wiring needs in that area, and the rest could probably be storage. But as far as impacting storage in the remaining portion of the building, there's nothing planned at this point anyhow.
Jim,
Okay.
we wouldn't be able to get rid of the storage sheds that we've built along with
The squatter huts?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
Jim, you're going to see, so we work exclusively with school districts, and I would say that storage is something that comes up in every single district that we work in. One of the themes that you'll see, though, as we go through the presentations tonight, wherever we've been able to allocate potential referendum funding directly to student space, that's what we've done. You know, you're going to have some constraints from a budgetary standpoint, and we really want to try and maximize what we can do in terms of how that impacts students. And we can deliver you a few dumpsters to get everybody's stuff out of classrooms if you want. All right, let's take a look at option B. If my mouse comes across, there we go.
Very good. So option B takes a look at a larger addition. It encloses the circulation loop in the elementary school. I think that would help improve circulation in general in that building. You can see in the table on the bottom left, this option considers moving 5th graders over to the elementary school due to the additional classrooms, and then 6th, 7th, 8th over to the high school. Utilization rates, you know, at the elementary school, we're getting really close to 100%, even with this added square footage, but it's still better than it is today. And then at the high school, you're looking at a utilization rate of 57% just by pushing those students over there. We'll flip to the next slide. The proposed addition at the front, you know, largely the same. Potentially the cafeteria gets a little larger would be one option here. But otherwise, the proposal at the front really remains the same. The bigger difference is the learning environments in the new addition. So I've extended that around the corner. So that now there's 8 new additional classrooms. There's some flexible collaborative learning common space. That's really a great opportunity for, you know, some small group collaboration. You know, there's shown as having a project lab. So maybe that's a maker space. One of the things we hear with every district we work with today is the need for more CTE programming. And that really extends down to the elementary schools. We're seeing now too is how can we provide the opportunities to the younger grades to really become a feeder program for those middle and high school career and technical education programs. So a makerspace, a project lab, they can double as a classroom in a bubble year. They can double as an art room if needed. If we have teachers that have specific science projects they want to use, it's a great opportunity for you to bring some more STEAM programming into the elementary level. You know, special education we know is a priority with your district, just like it is at most. So providing a really nice, adequate sized special education suite. And then staff collaboration. So we want to have additional spaces for staff resource, places for staff to meet and collaborate, but also the location of that potentially near an open learning environment like the Learning Commons provides that passive supervision for the use of that space to be maximized. Any questions on this option?
Just initial feedback, initial thoughts. Okay. We'll take silence as affirmation. Okay.
Yeah, so we also, you know, really began taking a look at an addition at the high school to support the middle school. And we created some options at the elementary to really try to alleviate some of that high utilization we were seeing, and also just as an alternative idea for your community to consider as we look at a potential project in the future. So as I mentioned, this idea would include an addition at the middle school. You can see the utilization rates in the bottom left, or the table. This really shows the highest improvement for utilization in all of the buildings. You know, this looks at having an addition at the high school to support the middle school students grades 4 through 7, and then 8th graders moving up to the high school level. And so what that allows us to do in the same square footage at the elementary school is lose the quantity of 4th graders to really relieve the stress and the pressure that building is seeing. So that utilization rate drops to 90%. So that's the high end of that sweet spot we're looking for. You know, the new middle school, it'd be right at 85%. And then the high school taking on the 8th graders still leaves quite a bit of capacity and has that number at 50%. just something to be aware of. Any of the buildings we look at, we begin to identify potential ADA concerns at the building. Anytime we're doing construction projects, there's a certain percentage of that project budget we need to spend on ADA restroom facilities, bring those up to compliance. So this just identifies some of the ADA needs at the high school, and they can range anywhere from some of the restrooms maybe don't have a vertical grab bar, so really easy fixes like that, to things in the locker rooms where there's not an ADA accessible shower. So this just begins to highlight those areas. We'll dive into more depth at a later date on what's needed in those spaces individually. This is a proposed site plan. So you'll see in the left-hand side of this drawing, you have the existing building. The dark blue box would be the proposed addition to house the middle school students. Some reconfiguration at the front of the building required for, pickup drop-off lines, reconfiguring that parking. Again, just a very high-level conceptual idea of what that could look like. Putting a playground out on the east side of the site. We're bringing potentially 4th, 5th, 6th grade students over to this building, so we'd be looking at some outdoor play space for them. And then putting some additional parking at the back side of that addition. So this begins to look in a bubble diagram format of what that first level could look like. So adjacent the existing pack, so that hallway we would extend into the new addition. You'd have a gymnasium, some locker rooms to support that new capacity. Admin space right at the front entrance of the building. And then from there we move into the learning environment. So there's the meeting rooms, the staff collaboration spaces, 8 classrooms per floor, special education suite, some restrooms. And then the gray rectangles just represent our vertical circulation. So our elevators, our stair shafts to connect up to the 2nd floor. And on the 2nd level, much is the same. You'll notice a few changes on the left-hand side of the drawing. So some additional special education space, some multi-use space, whether that's some indoor movement space when the weather is like it is today, or it's raining, or it's too cold, and then some additional office spaces up there as well.
Okay. Thoughts, questions, any initial kind of feedback on this?
Is there anything added as far as the generator for the school system itself?
Nick, I don't know if you can talk specifically to generators. So generally, this new building would be largely self-supported. We would extend the sprinkling system from the adjacent pack, since that's the only portion of the building that's sprinkled. So we'd extend that into the new system. Otherwise, it would be new rooftop units to serve this area most likely.
Yeah, currently I'm looking at the existing generator and trying to come up with some solutions for that. But as it stands, not included in this portion of the building right now. But if it's of concern, we can definitely look at it moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Roberta, tell me what your concern is.
I just know that our community is majorly lacking in case of an emergency within the community. And currently that high school, actually all the schools, only have generator for the hallways. Not even to the point of being able to have bathroom facilities, and that type of thing. And I mean, I'm sure that that's very costly, but I was just wondering if that had been added in, because it is an overall good thing to have for the kids in the school, but also for our community.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And Ryan, we can have some conversations about whether or not we can make this into an emergency shelter too.
Yep, certainly.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I will say that we have looked at a lot of different iterations of what a potential addition looks like at the high school. That we looked at, could we build second levels on top of the existing floor plan? We've looked at some other potential site locations. The reason that this one makes the most sense is because if we touch the other parts of the building, so for example, if we went up a story on some of those wings, the entire high school would have to be sprinkled. And the cost of doing that would, again, coming back to that focus of trying to get the investment directly into students' experience, it would mean a good proportion of potential investment going into just sprinkling to meet code concerns. By putting it in this location, it's attaching onto a part of the building that already has sprinkling, and so we can avoid that particular code concern.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Michael.
Any other thoughts? Okay.
You mentioned elevators. Did you,
Yep.
is there one in each of those two gray areas, or is there one as a stairwell and one as an elevator?
Generally we would plan one in a building like this. Certainly something we could take a look at adding another. At this point, this is really very diagrammatic, very conceptual, and a lot of flexibility in what the final layout would look like. I think one thing to remember is upon a successful referendum in a project like this, there's going to be an 8 to 12 month time period where our design team is meeting with your staff, meeting with your community to find out exactly what is right and will serve your community best. So right now, these are conceptual plans to get us some direction on costing. So if something like that will be beneficial, we can certainly take a look at that going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ryan. So all of the development and conceptual work as we go up to a referendum is exactly that. It's conceptual. It's to give us an indication of what the budget needs to be and whether or not, of course, the public support that. If the public support it, that's when the much more fine-tuned design work really happens to make sure that we're fitting the needs of both the investment level and the district. Other questions or comments before we move into the next part of the presentation?
Any of the administrators have any questions?
Hi, this is Roxanne. I'm the principal at AFE. So back to the elementary school. I'm just wondering on option B, when you close off those two wings, what happens to that courtyard, or is there a plan for what would be on the other side of the gym? So kind of in that middle rectangle there when you close them off?
Nothing at the conceptual level plan. I know, there's a lot of opportunities when we enclose a courtyard to provide some outdoor learning space that has, the protection. Some buildings choose to put some early childhood playgrounds in those courtyards because they're enclosed. So I think there's a lot of flexibility with what could happen in there. The one thing we look at is maintaining windows into each of the classrooms. That certainly informed the layout and shape of that, as well as connecting the circulation and corridors.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Roxanne. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. All right, let's go back to so whenever we're talking about the idea of potential consolidation, I think it's really worth us just discussing what some of the pros and cons are to that. With regards to moving grades to the high school, there's certainly the elimination of that costly maintenance of the middle school. That middle school is going to continue just to cause problems as we go down the line. It would really equalize as well the experience that students are having. So now middle school students will have much more modern functional spaces, and it becomes a much more efficient use. Just looking at that space utilization, it's starting to really right size the different different schools within the district. In the long term, it's definitely going to be a much cheaper option for you to do an addition at the high school or the elementary school rather than trying to maintain that middle school. And it also can coincide with future growth. At the moment, you've got a huge amount of capacity there, whereas, you know, again, just mirroring what we're seeing from a demographic standpoint means that we're adding the appropriate amount of space. Are there downsides to it? The first one there, which is whenever we're talking about closing a school, it's going to be met with resistance. You know, that building's been in your community for 106 years. It probably has an emotional attachment to it from a lot of people. So there will be some resistance to it. In terms of our community survey, which is ongoing, and I would really encourage you guys to get people to fill that survey out. We're seeing about 70% of your community saying, yes, it makes sense for you to look at options around consolidating that middle school. And that's a really high percentage. So I think people have recognized that this building has served its purpose for Adams Friendship. But in terms of a future investment, it might not be the best thing. The second piece is obviously going to be the tax impact on this. So we have to be very considerate of what's possible and what's not possible. And then the third component to it is obviously at the moment you still have your athletic facilities at the middle school. By consolidating across the high school, you wouldn't necessarily have changing spaces there at the moment. There are some options around that, but it would make it slightly what's the word I'm looking for? Disparate feeling between the athletic space and the high school.
And
Okay.
Michael, I would just add one more kind of con is what do we do with that facility? The iconic building on Main Street, I think it would be very difficult, although there might be some interest in trying to convert that into housing. I think the return on investment based on the electrical systems and plumbing systems in that space would be really, really difficult to do. And then what do you do with it? Obviously, we don't want that building to sit and continue to deteriorate in the center of our community.
Yep, and that's not necessarily an answer for that today. I know that to demolish that building, to raise that building, would be a very expensive project, $3 to $4 million. The amount of investment that it would need to continue as a functioning school is very much larger. You know, probably somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 million to really get that into a state where it's you're seeing some consistency across the elementary, middle, and high. A lot of school districts just shutter buildings. You'll see, I think Merrill, not too far from you guys, has failed referendums now consistently because they're trying to just generate income or investment for tearing down buildings. It's again coming back to that focus. Any investment that we're going to get from this referendum needs to directly go into student facing and student the improvements directly for students. So spending $3-4 million on tearing that building down might not be the best thing for you guys to do. Is it an option? Absolutely. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay. Let's talk about wants versus needs. So whenever we're working with school districts and we're asking the community to invest, we have to really make sure that we're being as cognizant of that investment as possible. So when we've looked at your district, it really feels like the highest priority need sits in what do we do with that middle school? Moving either an addition across to the elementary or across to the high school. But we want to make sure that we're planning you out for the long term, not just this referendum, hopefully what I showed you in My Site IQ gives you a little idea now of how we can see everything in a phased approach. So planning for the needs at this point, what's the highest need, and is that something that the community is prepared to support? And then using those needs and using the phasing to work on high priority items down the line to eventually get to the end of your journey. This one referendum is not going to take you from your current situation to everything is perfect and everything fits exactly how we want it. It would just require an investment level that's too great. So I really want you guys to see this as this is the best first step that we can take on that pathway. So we'll create not only what this step is, but what those subsequent long-term plans look like for you. Okay. I want to talk about a little bit about how do these findings match what we're hearing from the community engagement team. They'll be presenting to you soon. We really are strong advocates that referendums should be driven by the community who are investing in them. We're far more successful when it comes to actually doing that if we're listening to your community. So we want this to be community supported, technically correct for the building and also for the district, as well as we want it to be fiscally responsible. What we're hearing from the community engagement task force at the moment, they've made the same conclusion, which is that middle school is not necessarily worth investing in. Looking at grade reconfiguration to the high school, at the moment they're suggesting moving 4th grade from the elementary up to a middle school addition at the high school. But I don't want to get ahead of them. They'll be presenting to you at the first workshop, and they will come to you with, we've looked at all of this, we've looked at all the data, we've looked at all the information. This is what we're recommending as a community. One of the problems that you guys have is you have a lot of potential pathways. There's a lot of different ways that you guys could take this. Are there infrastructural needs that we could justify at this stage? Yes. Could you run a referendum purely on fixing some of those infrastructural pieces? You could. You can certainly avoid trying to spend middle school with view to close. You could look at an addition at the high school. We could look at additions at the elementary with grade reconfiguration. We could look at changing facilities again at the athletics. One of the things that you will notice that we didn't talk about today is the idea of moving the district office. There is potentially capacity still within the high school to reallocate space to the district office, but looking at the running costs and the needs of the district office building to replicate that space in a new addition would again be pulling away from student investment and putting it into something that typically is fairly unpopular with communities. And then we've got just infrastructure for a second time. The point trying to make is there are lots of different ways, and each one is a step on that journey. Depending on what the community survey comes back with and the task force comes back with, I think that will really inform as we go into workshopping which one of these pathways becomes the most clear for you. I want to talk a little bit about tax implications too. So with everything that we're talking about, there's obviously a voter approved bond that's going to be required from it. This is your mill rate. Is everybody familiar with mill rates, or would you like me just to do a quick finance 101? I'll assume silence is again good. So at the moment you have a mill rate of $6.14. You can see that has ticked up a little bit from 2023 due to the passing of the operating referendum. The yellow line across the top there is the statewide average mill rate. So you're still significantly below where that statewide number is. But what you can also see from this is in the last 10 years, your mill rate has decreased by about 40%. So you're in a position where you're receiving less income, but with ever increasing needs. When we look at this, when we look at potential investment levels, and we look at the tax impact of those investment levels, what we can see is if you have a residential home taxable value at 150,000, let me get my pointer over here. A $10 million investment would cost about $3.87 a month. A $14 million question would be $550, $713, and $873. I've taken that 150 as it's closer to your median household value. You have a very interesting district in so much as you have a lot of second homes, a lot of high value second homes, especially in the north of the district. They would not be eligible to vote in this. However, they would have the corresponding tax impact. How do you stack up against your neighbors? So when we look at your other neighboring districts, this is what your mill rate is compared to them. So Adams Friendship, we're at 614. Wisconsin Dells down the road, about 30 cents higher. You've got Westfield, which is at the moment the lowest on here. However, with the referendum that's just passed, that will be actually going up to 651. So it will jump them quite significantly up that table. So from a comparative standpoint, you're certainly a low taxing district, and that doesn't mean that we can jump that up. It means we have to be very cognizant of it. But what we're seeing from the community survey at the moment is you have a fairly polarized district. You have a lot of people who are very happy to support 22 plus. You have a lot of people who are saying, I'm not prepared to support anything. So really our job as a board, as we go into workshopping, will be to look at that data and look at what do we think is an investment level that's comfortable from a mill rate and comfortable from that actual tax impact that we feel on a daily basis. Thoughts, questions? Okay. That's really the end of our data dump today. The elephant in the room is you'll notice that we haven't put prices to any of these solutions at this stage. We've been working very frequently with the district at admin level. The fact of the matter is, because of the rush of this, we're just not quite at solidified pricing. There's a lot of volatility, as you guys might be aware of, in terms of what might happen with tariffs, what might happen just generally in the construction market. So by the time we get to our first workshop on January 7th, we will have cemented prices for you at that point. Everything that we're looking at and presenting fits within what we feel are achievable tax impacts, or can be scoped back to fitting within those. So there's a few different conversations that myself and Tom are having in terms of how to maximize the investment from our side. How do we meet as many needs as possible with the best value from that particular project? Okay, what do we want you to think about going forward? So we have about 3 weeks until that first workshop. Obviously, we have Christmas in the way, and I'm sure that we will all be putting this on the back burner for the time being. But I certainly like you just think about a few things between now and that first workshop. And it really is driven by, what do you think the biggest priorities of the district are? In this unbelievably rare situation that Nick is not necessarily telling you that you have to fix everything that's in your existing buildings, what are those priorities? Would it be helpful if I sent this slide as an email to you guys, so that I see a few of you trying to scribble down the questions on this. I can certainly send it across. Yeah.
Will we get
that would be
access to
great.
the presentation or?
What's causing the most pain for the district, right? Knowing that we're not going to be able to do everything that we want, what are those biggest pain points that you really want to make sure are rectified in this referendum? Again, wants versus needs, recognizing that we're not going to get everything. What are the most important things, and how do we get to those wants further down the line? That, when I say needs as a way to want, at the moment, one of your biggest constraints as a school district is that you don't carry any debt from a building bonds perspective. By having debt back onto your building bonds, what it allows you to do is get much more creative in terms of subsequent referenda. Everything that we're looking at here has a new tax impact. By having debt back onto your books, there are ways where you can create tax neutral situations where you can reinvest without asking for tax increases. So by concentrating on the needs at this stage, it will allow you to build a much better case and a much better justification for some of those wants further down the line. And that's really talking about a phased approach. The last piece is I really want you to think about what the impact is if we don't do this right now. So there were a few different things in the works for the district over a long period of time. By not passing this referendum at this stage, it really sort of scuppers your ability to work on buildings for a good couple of years in terms of the next referendum and then another subsequent year. So really, you know, if this one doesn't pass, there is no investment in your buildings at least until 2028. So when we're talking about choosing scope and budget for this particular question, we really need to be cognizant of what the impact is if it's not something that is favorable by your community. All right, let's talk about next steps. So our next steps, we've got those 2 board meetings booked in on the 7th and 15th, where we'll jump into workshopping. I'm very, very hopeful that we'll be able to do that in person so that we can avoid the virtual aspect and we can get into, you know, much better conversations that way. On the 7th, you're going to have the community engagement team reporting back to the board. We're going to try and decide what the budget is going to be and what the scope of that work is. We have a hard deadline, which is we have to have the resolution approved by the board and into the state by January 21st. That gives us the opportunity to go to that April 1st referendum. What does workshopping look like? So the goals of workshopping, we're really trying to decide on both the short-term and long-term plans for the district. So the short-term is what does this next referendum look like? And that obviously has a knock-on effect for what the long-term plan looks like. There are always there's 3 questions that I'm going to get you to keep coming back to as we go through that workshopping. And those 3 questions are, is this right for your students? Is this right for your community? And is this right fiscally? If we can answer yes to each of those, we've got a great project and we're going to be successful with it. If we can't answer yes to one of those, we need to come back and we need to have subsequent conversations and we need to get to that yes, yes, yes. We're going to present a lot of information at that workshop. So again, you're going to have the community engagement team presenting their recommendations. We're going to have the community survey results. Please encourage anybody that you meet to fill out that survey. If you don't have the links to it, again, we can get those across to you. It's really important that that data is as accurate as possible, because that's going to help us really set the right budget and the right scope. I'll bring Nick along in terms of taking you through some of the different infrastructure projects that you can consider and the pricing estimates with that. Ryan's going to be leading the conversations when it comes to that programmatic piece, and again, the estimates that come alongside with that. We're going to talk about expected life cycles, and that's your existing infrastructure. How long do you have left on some of these pieces? Can we push some of this down the line? And then, of course, the all-important question of what does this do from a tax impact standpoint, and what does it do to our mill rate? What we're really trying to achieve is budget, scope, and then that plan for the future. So workshopping, they're really interactive. It's going to be a lot of engagement, a lot of fun. It's tiring. There's a lot of information that gets spread through it, but this is where we really get the chance to shape what this next stage for Adam Friendship looks like. In record time, we had 2 hours set aside for this, but you guys, you've all lost your voice, I think. It must be something to do with the snow. So any questions or thoughts at this stage? What else can we help you with?
Personally, I would just like to know how to locate the community survey or how to get the link. I don't, maybe I missed something, but I don't find that I have that.
Roberta, we'll make sure that we get that across to you.
the presentation that you gave today, will we get access to that?
I can see if I can get this into a emailable format for you, and again, I'll get it across the admin team. Nick likes to put pictures in that take up our own entire computer memory, so I'll see if I can get it into a more digestible size for you. Any other thoughts or questions?
No, you got a lot of information that, I think we all got to digest a little bit, and it's a good starting point to where we need to go. So I really appreciate your guys' time and effort that you've stuck into this so far. So
yeah, and I have to say, Jim, I feel because we were pretty late to the table in this process, it feels really rushed and pushed, and I just want to reassure you guys that what you're seeing here is the tip of a huge iceberg that we've been working on. It's gonna feel, as we go through those workshops, like we're making some pretty big decisions, but I do also want to give you the confidence that it is the beginning. You're not signed up to those particular floor plans. It's conceptual. Really, the rubber hits the road once the public says yes.
okay. Is there anything else from the board? All right. Do you have anything, Tom?
People are surprisingly quiet tonight, and I think partly because we're meeting in this format rather than in person. So, board members, please, board members or administrative team members or anyone that's on this call, please ask questions now if you can.
I will make another suggestion. So we have that meeting starting at 5:30 on the 7th. I'm very happy to come out to the district for that whole afternoon so that I can meet with board members in pairs, or we want to, obviously we don't want to infringe on any meeting regulations, but I know it's much easier to digest a lot of this when it's in person. So, I'm happy to be out there for that afternoon if that's something that board members would like from me. Roberta, I'm seeing a nod from you.
Yes, I would be interested in that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it looks like you and I are having a date, but no one else is joining. So, okay.
Guess we could do lunch.
Oh, you know what? That sounds like a great suggestion. Yeah, Tom. We'll borrow Tom's cup. No, we won't. Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you again for the flexibility tonight. And like I said, I'll send you this. I'll get it across to the admin team. I'll get you the community survey links, and then I'll also I'll get you my contact details, and we can tie up some times for earlier on the 7th. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. So I guess for the board, is there any objection for adjournment?
No.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Merry
Good night.
Christmas.
Happy holidays.
All righty, I'm out of here. It's my live stream ended. Ooh. I was worried there for a second. I thought it ended.